If I'm being honest, he makes the Turks on Battlefield 1 feel just a little more tolerable. Folks, welcome back to The Narrative with me, your host, Vrilliam, the host with the most and the most exploitable world resources. Folks, everyone is talking about it. Some are calling it a new Bay of Pigs. I'm speaking, of course, about the influencer flight to Havana, Cuba. And of course, in that conversation, people are focusing on one Hasan Piker. Yes, the self-described champagne socialist Twitch streamer Hasan Piker. Before we get into all that, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell to get notified whenever I make a new post, and let's jump right into the story. Despite rolling blackouts in Cuba due to our larger embargo on consumer goods and general technology, he managed to stream the entire thing, something that people were incredibly suspicious about. He also showed up to the poverty-ridden nation in a $690 button-down shirt. So, needless to say, it was an interesting time, had by all. Now, a lot of people are criticizing Piker here for his champagne socialist tendencies. The fact that he's obviously very wealthy, both from his career, but also by birth. He was born into a fairly wealthy Turkish media family. You may recognize his family line in one Cenk Uygur. I'm gonna be honest, I've never said it out loud. The guy from the Young Turks, Hassan being born into that family and then offered media opportunities in that same family. I'm actually fairly certain he is the world's first Nepo anchor baby. And I'm not kidding when I say that. He actually literally was an anchor baby. He was born here, lived here not very long, and then went back home to Turkey, only to then utilize his birthright citizenship status to come back later. And actually, he was born in New Brunswick, New Jersey. Fun fact, not super far from here. Crazy to think this state produced him, me, and Tony Soprano. A lot of people, nonetheless, are criticizing him for his champagne socialist tendencies, the fact that he proclaims himself to be this great warrior for the working class, for the downtrodden of society, and yet he himself is quite wealthy. And you may think that that's the criticism I hold for him, but that's not the case at all. No, because see, his views on wealth and his wealth, they're not contradictory in the slightest. Actually, they're very complementary. This is because Piker, alongside his other contemporaries, whether they be in streaming or in politics, none of these people are conventional economic Marxists or economic socialists. These people are race communists. Race communists in the idea that they do follow an ideology that can only and truly be described as race communism. Yes, that's not just a phrase we throw around at people we don't like. This is an actual ideology that is rooted in history. A history that leads us to individuals like Hasan Piker today and proves itself to be a uniquely modern threat in the face of an ever-changing world. And so today, for my genuine critique of one Hasan Piker, I want to take a second to understand a little history here before we really break down what it is that he believes. Now, you can't talk about the politics of Hasan Piker without talking in a grander sense about Third Worldism. See, Third Worldism is an ideology that spawned after World War II. Now, not a lot of people know this, but the term Third World, that's actually a Cold War term. Now, we commonly think that Third World just means any poor country, but it actually has a geopolitical meaning. See, following World War II, the world was split into three different spheres. There was the First World, that is the capitalist West, think NATO, Europe, America, and then the communist Iron Curtain Eastern Bloc, that being the Soviet Union, the Warsaw Pact, etc. Now, the Third World just meant anybody who wasn't aligned with either. It just so happened that all of those unaligned countries happened to also be countries that were pretty freshly decolonized, at least in a grander geopolitical sense. And so that stuff leaned into the Cold War era, pretty heavily. And so all these unaligned states were usually countries that just finished being decolonized. And it's in the Third World that the Cold War was litigated. That's where it happened. Because the Soviet Union wasn't going to gain a lot of ideological or political ground in Sweden, and America wasn't going to gain a lot of ground in Poland. But the Third World, all these new countries flirting with the idea of nationalism and, different ideologies surrounding it, well, that was a place that was perfect to have this battle. In 2004, U.S. soldiers stationed in Baghdad, Iraq, noticed that local peddlers were selling an interesting product. The Osama bin lighter made waves in the U.S. military. Only a limited amount of these were purchased with no tracking number by U.S. soldiers in Iraq, never to be seen again, until one brave man decided to bring back this iconic product. Available for pre-order now, Lord Miles has brought back the Osama bin lighter. Now sold in a perfect stainless steel metal casing, USB-C recharging, and of course, an included soundtrack. Folks, be sure to check the link in the description of this video to get yours today. Folks, time is running out on these. Only a limited number will be created, so be sure to pre-order yours today and secure yourself a new piece of classic history with the iconic Osama bin lighter. Now let's get back to the video. And so once the Third World is defined, it's around the 1950s that the actual doctrine of Third Worldism forms. Now, people like India's Nehru, Egypt's Nasser, and Indonesia's Sukarno, they are the first to create the sort of anti-colonial and third worldist movement, the Afro-Asiatic solidarity. This was part of the grander, non-aligned movement, which was started by Joseph Broz Tito. Oh, he deserves a video. I love Tito. Tito's like probably one of my favorite world leaders to ever exist. More on that in a later video for sure. See, it's in the 1960s though that radical third worldism forms. The original third worldism was just third world leaders saying, hey, we should start looking out for ourselves, or maybe we have more in common than we thought. Maybe we should establish trade networks and like university exchanges, etc., etc. But no, the 1960s to the 70s, this is when it becomes a meaningfully anti-Western ideology. This is around the time in which Marxism starts to make its way into these societies. Again, the Third World at this time, this is an ideological battleground, part of the Cold War. And so Marxism starts to find its way into these very recently decolonized societies and starts to take shape with thinkers there. Great example is someone like Che Guevara, right? Like these people who are Caribbean or Latin American or African socialist Marxist thinkers who are combining this Marxist dialectic with just a fucking resentment for the West. I don't know how else to say it. Like this resentment for the West. And this is an ideological tradition that flourishes over the 20th century. It kind of becomes the de facto ideology of the Third World. And funny enough, it's actually like the West and the East, they both utilize this. Like what ends up happening basically in the Third World, it very quickly becomes a battle of Marxists versus whatever was going on there. So whether it's Islamists, fascists, phalangists, all sorts of shit. And let me note, at this time, that this is where the ideological government of the Third World starts to form. When you think of a Third World country being led by an ideological leader, like an ideological strongman, this is where it starts. This is where you get Gaddafi. This is where you get Saddam. This is where you get Mugabe, etc., etc. Okay? And let me also note that it's a little confusing because obviously anytime these leadership groups call themselves socialists or Marxists, it's usually because they just wanted funding from the Soviet Union. And then like all of the Islamist groups, for example, they just wanted funding from the West. All of the Mujahideen groups, they just wanted the West to give them guns. It's the way in which the Third World is attempting its hand at geopolitical opportunism in order to build state power, okay? Eventually, however, the 90s hit, and obviously the Soviet Union falls. Once the Soviet Union falls, this sort of like ideological battle of Third Worldism falls apart, mostly because the Soviet Union isn't there to fund it. You know what I mean? Like eventually you run out of Soviet money, and so this whole ideological battle falls apart. This is also when the doctrine, like I said in the last video, of neoconservatism gets its first like big victory, And so now global trade, like global free trade, that's become the new big thing. And so all these developing nations, now they want to get a piece of that pie. And so suddenly all of the people's fronts and socialist fronts and radical groups, they all start to fall apart because people want to start trading with the United States. And so you may be saying to yourself, okay, well, it seems that that was a sort of relic of the Cold War. Okay, that's a fun moment in history. It's something to talk about, and it led to some cool stuff and some not so cool stuff. But what does that have to do with a Twitch streamer today? Like, what's the connection there? Third Worldism didn't die. It just evolved, if that makes sense. See, you have to understand the line of thinking to get this stuff. Prior to decolonization, all of these states say, well, things would be better if we weren't colonized. If we threw off the shackles, the yoke of colonization, things would be better. They did that, and then obviously things didn't get better. Actually, one could argue they got significantly worse in most cases. Then it became, okay, let's adopt third worldism. Maybe the reason things aren't good is because we weren't given a fair shake. We weren't given a fair shot. So now we can form ideology and we can take a shot at this and we can catch up to the rest of the world. But obviously the Cold War ends, the money from either side runs out, and that falls apart very quickly. So what is the answer? Well, they make the argument of, okay, on one side, we had America, which at the time of the Cold War was basically all white people. White people. I mean, come on. Listen, we did a whole video on the neocons. I'm just saying. And on the other side, you have another group of white people. Granted, it's debated whether or not the Soviets, whether or not the Russians are white. In the eyes of somebody from, I don't know, Nigeria, they're both white people. And so this new ideology forms that maybe the reason why things aren't good is because of the white people. We had left-wing whites on one side, right-wing whites on the other. God, say that 3 times fast. Right-wing whites. Right-wing whites. Surprisingly, I have very little of those in my comments. Now, this is where the Marxist idea, the Marxist philosophy, evolves once more with these people. This is where the ideology of someone like Hasan Piker first forms, that being race communism, race Marxism. What does that actually mean? Well, it's basically Marxian economic model, or the sort of like Marxist philosophical model, but in terms of race, rather than economics, rather than actual productive capacity. I know from my streams that much of my audience is fucking stupid. So I'm going to try and explain this as simply as possible, because in order to understand this, we have to understand what Marx actually believed. So let's take a moment here to explain that. A lot of people think that Karl Marx's Communist Manifesto was like 300 pages of the guy writing over and over again, I hate rich people, Shabbat Shalom. That's not the case. The guy was a philosopher, like he had actual ideas, okay? And the biggest of that is the concept of base and superstructure. If you take any like philosophy class, especially a political philosophy class in college, it's like the first thing they teach you about. Marx basically argues that all of history is a class struggle. And the two byproducts of that are something called base and superstructure. Base meaning like a base, like a foundation. So think labor, productive capacity, factories, weapons, etc., etc. Real, tangible, physical things, okay? And then on top of that base, on top of that foundation, is what he calls the superstructure. This is more abstract stuff. Think culture, art, nationality, or like national identity, ideology. These things are the superstructure, okay? And Marx argues that the base determines the superstructure, that the superstructure is used to control, sort of corral and wrangle the base, and the base determines it. So England is Anglican, and the Anglican Church is a wing of the royal family, of the monarchy. So that's the superstructure, okay? The base is the English people who are Anglican, and then the superstructure is the Anglican Church, the Archbishop of Canterbury, yada, yada, yada. And in Marx's view, the state uses that, the bourgeois, okay, the rich, the elite, whatever you want to call them, those who own the means of production, they use that to control the base. Do you see what I mean here? This is why Marxism is historically so atheistic, is because they view religion as, like he said, the opiate of the masses. They view it as a control mechanism, as superstition, as part of the superstructure that the base really defines. And so in his mind, from the Marxist perspective, Raj from Calcutta, India, and Ryan from London, England, both of them work in car factories in their respective countries, okay? In Marx's view, you could take Raj and put him in London and put him in that factory, and you could take Ryan, put him in Calcutta, put him in that factory, and nothing will have meaningfully changed because Marx was an internationalist. He believed the idea of nation, the idea of affinity, of tribalism, that's superstructure, that's bourgeois, that is bullshit in his view, okay? This is like a defining feature of Marxism and of, like, historically, Marxists who espouse it. Now, with all that being understood, okay, race communism just takes that whole paradigm, but makes it about race rather than economics. This is because, I mean, you can't really make Marxism about economics anymore. Like, the means of production aren't here in America. They're in fucking China. It's not like the fucking proletariats of America are gonna rise up and seize the means of production. All of our presidential candidates since fucking Reagan have been telling us they're gonna bring back the means of production. It's not even here. And race communism follows this line. In their view, the world is separated into this dichotomy. But rather than the elites, than the bourgeois, the whatever the fuck you want to call them being on top, they believe it's white people that are on top. The collective white civilization is on top, with everybody else in varying degrees being underneath that as the proletariat. That the proletariat is the non-white. And in order for the proletariat to finally have its great revolution and finally live in peace and finally not live in shitholes, for lack of a better word, they need to uproot and get rid of the bourgeois, i.e. get rid of the white people. And you can see this in a lot of their rhetoric. This is because, again, they follow this base and superstructure model. So to them, India looks like that because white people exist and white people were exploitative and white people will naturally and innately be exploitative. And so India will never get ahead because of these darn white people. Meanwhile, none of them have ever asked the question, okay, maybe India looks like that because it's run by Indians. This is the prevailing mindset, okay? And this is what Hasan Piker represents. He is this sort of modernistic, like new age version of race communism. I mean, all of his guys, Mamdani, fucking Ilhan Omar, all these people, they all follow the same line. This is why the things that we see as contradictory aren't really contradictory. It's fine that he has a bunch of money because it's not about money. It's about race. It's fine that he is wildly pro-open border and pro-migration, even though that objectively harms the American working class, harms really the working class fucking anywhere. It doesn't matter, because the vast majority of the American working class is white. So it doesn't matter if he harms them. It's actually seen as a good thing if he harms them. It doesn't matter if things like traditionalism, more specifically Christian traditionalism, is a foundational aspect of the lives of all of the American working class, because again, they're white people. It doesn't matter. And inversely, it's totally excusable when brown people have wildly traditional and patriarchal views because they're not white. So in their mind, it's disempowered. It doesn't matter. This is how you also explain his whole outing to China, if you remember that, where everyone found it funny that the guy is so pro-China. He talked about how great the Chinese government was. Meanwhile, if America tried to implement, I don't know, like 1% of the state force and power that China has in its country, like, he would freak out and call it fascism. Because, like, let me know, China, autocratic state, incredible state power, profoundly traditionalist, not cool with the whole LGBT thing, a border policy that is somehow tighter than waterproof titanium, and a complete disregard, if not active antagonization of ethnic minorities. Again, these are all things if the United States did, Hasan Piker would be mortified. But when it's China, he thinks it's awesome. And there's a reason for that. It's because China, they're not white people. They're Han Chinese. Like, they're not white people. So it doesn't matter in his mind. This is what is so uniquely dangerous about this ideology, is because all the things he says, if he truly meant them for everyone, it doesn't sound that bad. I think you'd have a hard time finding people who would disagree with the idea of using the tax money that we basically dump into Israel and repurpose it for, like, I don't know, basic health care for the American people. That's not a bad idea. I think most people would agree with that. The problem is that when taken to its logical extreme, all of that nice health care and housing and public transport, white people don't get to have access to any of it. We don't get to have our culture or our countries or any of these things. We don't get to have any of it because the goal is, again, the uprooting of the bourgeois, of the ruling class, which in their mind, in their paradigm, is just all white people of any economic status. This is what makes his third worldism. This is what makes his brand, his flavor of third worldism understandable. Is if you understand that this is the mindset they're coming from, suddenly a lot of the things he does, they make complete sense. And so I say all of this because it ties into this grander theme that I think I have in my public thoughts of coalitional politics. Hassan is a great example of something we cannot have a coalition with, and I'll explain why. It's one thing to have a culture war issue. It's one thing to have a difference of opinion on cultural issues. You can even have a difference on, like, immigration issues. You can have a difference on what it fucking means to be an American, what level race or ethnicity or whatever plays into that. You can have that disagreement. However, you can't have that disagreement with somebody who wants your destruction. You can't do that. See, someone like an Anna Kasparian, you can have that coalition with her and that conversation with her because she clearly cares about America, just from a left-wing perspective, and she has a different view of what it means to be an American. But nevertheless, she likes America. Nevertheless, she likes the things that America provides. And she very clearly doesn't, like, outwardly profess race communist ideas. Even his uncle, Cenk? It can't be Cenk, right? That sounds like a slur, right? That can't be his name. Hold on. Cenk Uygur. Even that guy, we can have this conversation because it seems like he does genuinely care about the sustainment of America and the entirety of the American working class, which, as I said before, is majority white. And granted, would some of their proposed policies make it not majority white? Yes. And that's, again, we can have that conversation, but these are not race communists, okay? Meanwhile, Hasan Piker and his ilk, his crowd, they are. Furthermore, obviously we've talked about this, the coalition we're speaking about, this sort of America First coalition, it would be largely rallied around American support for Israel, around Israel's role in our government, okay? And obviously. Thing is, though, someone like Piker comes at the Israel question in a very, very different way. Because let me add, in the whole, like, race communism hierarchy, Jews, kind of like in the original Marxism, can apparently do no wrong. I mean, seriously, it was like literally today that a clip went all around X. It was like 30 minutes of him, just a supercut compilation of every single time he got on his knees and groveled for these people and explained how, oh no, the biggest vice of Western society is anti-Semitism, and how much he loves and adores people like Luxemburg or Trotsky. And so this is to say that Piker isn't an anti-Zionist, because Piker is like part of Zionism manifest. I've said this before in a clip on my Instagram that one of the big parts of Zionism is that in the actual land, in the Middle East, it is a nationalist movement, okay? We understand that. However, in order for that to be achieved, they need to be outwardly internationalist. They need to ensure that all of our countries, specifically the Western Christian countries, need to be internationalist. They need to be pacified through the sedation that is migration and multiculturalism. Piker represents that sedation. He represents that weapon. And so sure, all of these like idiot influencers you see on Twitter will go up and down all day calling him some kind of rabid anti-Semite, but they are well aware that Hasan Piker is not an anti-Semite. He is an incredible ally to the cause of Zionism. It was IsraAid itself, yes, an organization actually called IsraAid that was helping Syrians enter into the West during the Civil War and helping Turks enter into the West during the destabilization of that region. Like, this is not a guy who is politically challenging Israel, because he's not going to politically challenge the things that enables Israel. And so sure, he can go on his stream and watch Al Jazeera clips all goddamn day and talk about how much he loves Hezbollah, but nothing about his character nor his ideology actually threatens the existence of the state of Israel and the organized powers behind it. If he did, he wouldn't be on fucking Twitch, okay? He wouldn't. You wouldn't even know him, because he'd be in Turkey, because our administration has seemingly pointed all of our deportations at exclusively those who criticize the state of Israel. Oh my God. This is all to say that a coalition with him is not possible, because he's not on the same side as us on this issue. Like, a coalition requires that everyone be on the same side of at least one issue. He's not on any of our sides on any of these issues. He's a fundamentally different thing. And let me be clear, I don't think this guy's like a nefarious actor. I think he's just kind of an idiot who follows third worldism. Like, in his mind, the Israelis are white, and that this state is somehow, this is white supremacy manifest. However, then he'll turn around and, like I said before, get on his knees and grovel, proclaiming over and over again that he is not an anti-Semite, that anti-Semitism is this terrible thing. All of this can really just be summed up as something very, very simple. The guy doesn't like white people. He just doesn't. He doesn't like white people. He doesn't like white Christians. It's that fucking simple. And so everything else he believes runs downstream from that. Runs downstream from the very simple fact that his one and only fucking goal is the uprooting of white people from their societies and from their prosperity, because of this idea that if somehow they're able to do that, then things will be better. And that if you gave the United States to Somalis, well, it would run and function all the same, if not better. Even though, let's be real, if that were to happen, China would just take over. And this is what I find so fucking funny about this stuff, is because it seems like none of these people realize that it is literally only Western society that has ever pondered the idea of maybe we should apologize for our actions. Like, maybe tradition isn't the law of the land, the law of existence, and maybe we can learn from things that we did. It is literally only Western society that ever thought of that. I guarantee you, if the Chinese took over, like, they would stomp their way in here and look at all these people holding their signs, rallying for land back, and tell all of them, get in the polyester factory, you are going to make Fortnite hoodies now. Why would they care about the lasting legacy of colonialism, of the lasting legacy of, why would they give a fuck about any of that? Like, do you really think that Xi Jinping gives a fuck about Emmett Till? Because why the fuck would they? It makes no sense. But I digress. My thoughts on that's for another day or maybe another stream. It sounds dumb, but then again, it's literally called Third Worldism. Folks, this is going to do it for us today on this episode of The Narrative. I hope you enjoyed, folks. I appreciate all the love you guys have been showing me on these most recent videos. It feels like I'm really blowing up, and I'm so incredibly grateful. Glory be to God, and thank all of you. God bless all of you. If you like what you see, be sure to follow the page, turn on notifications. I stream here, and I think I get like at most maybe like 600 of you in a stream at like a peak time. So I'd love to get more of you in the stream. It's fun, a lot of jokes, a lot of laughs. You kind of get to see me in a more casual environment, less serious political ongoings, more me having fun and laughing and playing with my soundboard. Come on. I mean, come on. Doesn't that sound fun? Be sure to join sometime. If you want to follow my Telegram for updates, be sure to follow there. And on my other platforms. I mean, come on. My Twitter, my Instagram. I mean, like, do I have to shill all this like directly with words? There's a link tree in the description of this video. Just go on it, click all the buttons, and you're good to go. You're good to go. Folks, thank you again for everything. And as I always say, God bless you and God bless America.